good evening. Mike Dingeldein and Todd Thackery with SHP Leading Design. It's time for our quarterly update. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but it has been. We were in late June last. We presented a full update to the board. The flurry of work that's occurred since the last update has been mostly technical in nature, so there's not a lot of new design and those kind of things to show you. We do want to go back and show you sort of where we stood in beginning of Phase 2 and show you what they look like as we go into the final stretch of our working drawings and bidding coming right here at the first of next year. So there's a lot to share, and still continuing to go back and revisit all of the things that we learned from the district to set up our prototype standards. We now go back and do site traffic meetings and hardware and keying meetings with all the schools that are in this particular phase. But we built off a very, very good benchmark and standard from the beginning, and it ostensibly has remained very constant. And so our decisions and our avoidance of change and sort of second-guessing ourselves has really carried through. And so we're feeling like the work that we've put up in front of the project has been very prudent and very valuable as we go through the next phases of the work. We have 4 schools under construction, Phase 1, going very well. Each of them has, their own unique kind of site and issues, but the progress on each site has been pretty good. And in fact, at Harmon, there's finished second floor slabs in place now. So when Russilli comes and does a construction update, you'll see the progress is pretty substantial, and we're again on track and on schedule and feeling very good about how things are unfolding in Phase 1. We added an extra challenge in Phase 2. We have 5 buildings to get out in Phase 2, and we're working on all of those right now. And as we've moved through the technical phases of the project, which is kind of what we've done in the last 4 months, we have discovered some hiccups and some challenges on the sites. But I still remain very committed to the idea that we did a great thing, the district, by deciding to reuse as many of the existing school sites as possible. One of those reasons is it's very consistent with your boundary planning goals. Having your original neighborhood sites still in play, having your attendance areas going to be very close to where they were, and not moving students around between different sites. I've learned in a lot of school districts that creates kind of a downtime for a couple of years when students are in the midst of moving to and from different sites. So I think we've minimized that in this project, and that continues to be, I think, a great story to tell about the decision to keep the sites. So Darbydale is our first project up tonight. It's our first prototype of a 400-student elementary. And so it did require, I guess, the most new work in Phase 2 because we did not have a 400-student prototype in Phase 1. As we looked at that site, we knew it was tight. And again, those decisions were made for good reasons. And as we learned about the technical things, especially the setbacks on both Groveport Road and Norton Road, we had to tweak the building a little to get inside those setbacks. So we tucked it in tightly, but we have everything amenity-wise that we wanted. We have the parking, the bus drop-offs, the separation, the playground areas, everything's covered, and we're not impacting the existing building at all for operation as a school. So we succeeded every way we wanted to on this site from the standpoint of having everything fit and allow us to have a very good transition year during construction and then a very nice completed site once the existing Darbydale school goes away. So there's what it looks like, nestled between the 2 streets. But again, the setbacks are good. The drop-off drives and the queuing space are good. The separate bus drive is good. We have everything we wanted, and we did not have to compromise spatially anything in this process. The look is a little different because this is our first, again, 400, but it's also our first 1-story school. And so we still have the sort of prominent entry piece, but you'll notice there isn't a second-story media center or a second-story classroom anywhere on the site. This has almost the same footprint as a 600 prototype, but it is completely 1-story. And so it gives us the same sense of scale and same sense of prominence to the building, even though it is much smaller than the 600 and 520. As you look at the cutaway inside, again, that same sort of special entry where we identify the school and have the prominent scale and size, the same feel exactly in terms of the major core spaces. The cafeteria is virtually the same size as the other buildings because that is driven by program requirements of the School Facilities Commission that kept that. Our entry is the same. We have that same sort of welcome nature, same sort of secure entry, and the office arrangement. The only thing we don't have really is the second-story media center above us. It's in a different place in the building that we'll show. The classroom wing will feel exactly like the 600s and 520s because, again, the same number of classrooms, the same distribution around an extended learning area, and so you won't have any sense of any difference in this building. So there it is. And again, you won't You won't tell that any different from a 600 school to a 400. Classrooms are all the same, have all the same amenities, all the same sizes. The gym is slightly smaller based on the program requirements, but it functions, and we still have a separate cafeteria and a separate gym, even for a small school. So we feel like we're doing all the right things relative to programming. The media center is slightly smaller, but again, we've put it together in a way that uses the spaces carefully. We still have that separate sort of meeting reading room that allows for that pull-out sort of work with the media center. And so really, this is going to feel like every other building despite its difference in size. Finland, again, fitting on a very tight site, wanting to pull away the activity and the crowd and sort of the queuing on both Finland Avenue and Marsdale, so we push the building to the north side of the site. It does a lot of things. Most importantly, it allows the existing Finland to operate unabated during the construction year. It allows us to recover softball diamonds and play fields, and it most importantly allows us to put the building on the internal sort of traffic flow of the site and get traffic and get queuing off of Finland Avenue, which is going to help. And so here again, the existing Finland remains perfectly out of our way and perfectly in operation by the construction phase. And by the time we finish next summer, the following summer, we'll be able to take the building down and finish the site work. So you can see the building's tucked up against the drive that connects the middle school to Franklin Woods Intermediate, recovers our play fields and our green space, and again, gets lots of traffic and queuing off Finland Avenue. So we feel like this turned out really well, and again, had very few compromises from any kind of site space needs. This is a two-story building. We call it the long version because the classroom wings are on either end of the core space, so it stretches out nicely and gives us the site space we need. But from the front, it has the same sort of character as all the two-story schools. Bolton Crossing is our first new site. Fantastically easier, I will say. If you look at the list of things to do relative to site approvals, they were almost non-existent on this site compared to the existing sites. Our first order of business was to line up with our Big Run site and make sure our driveway's hooked up with the Big Run site. We did that. Our second order of business, though, was to discover how we can think about using this site for more benefit down the road. So we thought about ways that we could build to the west and build to the south and double use some of the amenities like parking and shared drives. So we changed to a long scheme in order to have lots of clearance to the north and lots of clearance to the south to allow the drives to extend to the west or to mirror image a school to the south. So we feel like we've used just enough space that we need. We've got the right setbacks. We've got the right distances from the road. We've got aligned driveways, but we have the building exactly where we want it. And you can even see, we experimented, you can see a footprint of Jackson Middle School to the south of that large parking lot. All of that was just imagined as the way we can share amenities with a future middle school or another site, use of the site as we go down the road. Everything you see in the dark gray, that's the actual part that we're building today. So this site works out very well and left us with some amenities. Thanks, Todd. And again, a fairly similar sort of approach and look. And it'll have a nice approach and distance with the kind of open space that we get out there in the Big Run area. So this should be a pretty prominent and nice approach and look facing the south. Stiles was one of those sites that took a little more work than we thought. We had a place for it. It's certainly out of the way to the north side of the site. But as we got into the technical issues, and we'll use Todd's pointer, we found that there is a very wide drainage easement with the creek that goes from Grenner to the north side of the site. We had to push the building down a little to the south. And we looked at a long scheme, and we looked at different schemes, again, because our prototyping has been working very well to adapt to our sites. But in the end, we're going to lose just a tiny little bit of the existing stiles to get this entire building put in. So we're going to have a 2-classroom demolition project that goes with the building, and we are going to have to do a little bit of extra sort of work at Stiles to make sure we can operate in that 1 year without those 2 classrooms. So there is a little of a challenge that we had to finally get to the point where the 2 buildings had to intersect each other. And so we're dealing with that challenge, and it's going to be up to the school as well as up to the construction. But we are going to be able, again, to safely operate all of our new construction to the north side of the site and keep all of the circulation traffic flow to the south side of the site operational for that year. The other issue is the township very much wanted us to be a little more sensitive to the transition between residential lots, which you can see the lots there, and the school and the bus drive. And so we have, with agreement with them, let the natural berm, the fence that we are adding along that property line, and the dense sort of foliage we're adding along the property line help give a little bit of a transition, a little bit of a buffer between the residential and the school site. And so that didn't impact our programming or our site usage, but it was a little bit of an additional cost, but again, well below what it would cost to have gone to a new site. So we feel like this worked out. It took a little extra time, but we're happy with where the building is going to lay, and very happy with the idea that we're going to have main access off Grenner and not have to do all the traffic to the school inside the subdivision. So this is turning out to be a very good, different site for Stiles. And then finally, J.C. Summer. And of all things, one of our biggest sites, one of our easiest fits, turned out to be one of our more difficult ultimate solutions. And again, a lot of details and engineering and issues with the city came to play. And again, as we went through the technical phases, as you would expect, they started to become more or less apparent. And so as we looked at the site, here was our plan. We were using a T with the classroom wing to the back of the site, the service area to the front on Kingston, and the parking requirements, which were fairly large inside the city of Grove City. They have a much larger requirement for parking on school sites than the codes that we saw on the other sites. So we worked harder on this. We ended up filling the entire site, and in fact, to the dismay of the city, we really lost a lot of the green space that characterizes the J.C. Summer site. And so we worked with them to come up with some compromises, which involved a pretty dramatic shift because we went to a different prototype altogether. And so we actually turned the building with the classroom wing along Kingston. In exchange for that, the city reduced dramatically the parking requirement to be more similar to the other schools. And they are allowing us and helping us do bus drop-off in a right-of-way off the edge of the street. So we saved substantially on parking asphalt on this site by agreeing to kind of do a reboot on the actual footprint. This will be an exact version of the Alton Hall building from a prototypical standard. So again, very quickly, in a matter of weeks, we were able to pull the building up to the speed of the rest of the documents and get this done. So when you look at what it's going to be like now, you can see the classroom edge along Kingston, substantially more green space at the corner, which was a huge goal of the city, substantially less paving and parking on the site, which is a huge advantage for us from a cost standpoint. So it was awkward. It's come later in the process than we would have liked, but in the end, I think it resulted in a good compromise solution, and there was give and take on both sides that I think will make it a good project.
Can you show where the drop-off and pickup for buses will be then?
It is a widened edge of the street, so there's room for 10 buses along Kingston, and it's a separate paved area. It's not in the street. It's in actually a pull-off along the street. But again, instead of having to go, and I've got instead of having to go on-site with the turnaround bus drive, and that was really pushing up against Bostic and really causing us some struggle. We were able to get rid of that. We still have service access between Bostic and the new building, but the buses will queue up along the street and be able to go straight into the classroom wing of the building.
And if you actually drive by the site today, it already has that lane for five buses,
yeah.
And they're going to extend it so that it'll hold all 15.
Wow, okay.
And so it's what we do today from that sense, and it does separate parent traffic from bus traffic. And so that'll be a little different from the other sites. But also, Mike, you want to point to the exit on that side of the building? The exit is right there.
Right, straight out. Right, comes right off this access straight through. So there's
it's a very short
circle
walk.
Drive or circle walkway and a walkway all along here. The real improvement on this site, and we always were hoping for a lot, but we really got it substantial now, was the distance from the intersection. This is a very busy intersection, lots of backup during the day, is to get the ingress and egress off the site away from that intersection. Currently, Summer jumps out right near the intersection, and when it's full of cars, you just can't get out of that site. And so we're happy that we've gotten a lot better traffic flow based on this condition. And again, we ended up with less site costs as well. So we had about a 3-week kind of reboot, but in the end, I think it turned out to be a good solution. So that's the old one. So, and then Summer is going to be a very similar building in footprint and orientation to Alton Hall. So our schedule, just a week from Friday, we turn in our permit documents to all the permit authorities, City of Columbus, Grove City, State of Ohio, all of the ones that have jurisdiction. December 13th, we'll turn all of those permit comments around into what we call bid-ready documents. At that point, they're free to go out to bid and seek bids. We are, in order to take advantage of the number of bids we're going to get, and we'd like to have the opportunities for bidders to go after a second one if they don't get a first one, we're going to put them out in 2 short waves. Darby, Dale, Finland, and Bolton will go out first, and then Stiles and Summer will go out second, maybe 2.5, 3 weeks later, so that all the bidders who came in second or third place on the first round have a good running start to sharpen their pencil and come in better in the second round. Everybody will start construction in March, and everybody will be done in June with the exception of the site demo and the existing building demos, which will occur over that summer. But we're in a great position, much less ambitious and much less pressured than we were with Phase 1 because we couldn't get out on the street until April. So we're in a classic place here. We have a classic window to bid. First month of the year is always a great window to bid large commercial projects. And our construction will start well before there's any frost or freezing to deal with because we'll be out of the starting construction in the spring. Everything is kind of teed up to be exactly where you want it on the calendar. And so everything in Phase 2 looks to be even easier than Phase 1. And then Phase 3, we will actually get started right away on schematics. We'll have design development done in May, and then in August we will actually have the bid-ready documents ready. If we want to stay with our perfect windows, we might wait until January to do, again, 2 more waves of bidding. But there will be an opportunity anytime between September and January to do these bids if we watch the market and decide that we want to avoid inflation or we want to hit the right time of year. We have all that flexibility in front of us on Phase 3 because it gets even a little bit easier. And so no matter when, we will take bids no later than January of 15. All work will be complete in 2016 in the late summer. The one issue is in Phase 2, Bolton Crossing becomes potential swing space for Highland. So it is very important, but even with Highland as used as swing space in this configuration, we should have no issues with being done September of 2016 with all projects, all 13 elementaries. Are there questions you want me before I turn it over to Todd?
The other unique thing in Phase 2 is we have to do actually partial demos of 2 buildings, and I know Mike mentioned Stiles, but I believe JC is also a partial
Same
demolition.
thing, 2 classrooms on the end of the
And it's
wing.
4 at Stiles, I believe.
Well, it is actually the 1984 edition, so you're right.
So I believe there's actually 4. It's the new pod out back that has to go first in order to get the clearance for a safety perspective. So there will be work on that, and there will be some temporary issues of relocating students because the buildings cannot absorb those additional classrooms. The thought process right now is to look at modulars for those sites to see if we can make that work first, and if we can't make that work, we'll be back and have a different conversation with you about moving people off-site. But that's where we'd like to start and do our homework.
And I would say Highland using Bolton Crossing for a year, I find problematic.
And it could be you decide a couple other ways to skin that cat.
When we looked at, if you remember back to our last presentation, we tossed out a couple options. Modulars on the site was the one possibility.
For that?
And it really becomes a cost item. And that's probably, or that's the major reason for the conversation on Bolton. We just don't think that Old Finland necessarily has enough space. You'd have to break up kids. But we can spend some time and look into that and look at other scenarios. What we do know, to the point of Mike's presentation, is we are going to, because of the slope of that hill, we are going to have to vacate the site so we can build on the footprint. Right. What the resolution is, there's still time to talk about.
That's correct. So, point well taken. All right. We'll move on to high school.
Good evening. I have a fairly brief update for you on the high school. The main thing that's happened since we were here in June to update you is we achieved the guaranteed maximum price from your construction manager risk basically the end of September, 1st of October, to allow things to move forward. So it took a little time, a little working with the state to really refine their processes of how to get to that point. But we achieved it. Congratulations. This is your essential building, what we shared with you before. That's the only image I'm going to share with you tonight on that. Looking from the south side back toward your main entrance there to the right, in your student bus entrance to the south side of the building. And that is your existing auditorium that will be incorporated into the final design. In terms of the phasing, where we are now, based on that approval of the CMR contract, the 1st of October, we are now in the active bidding phase. They are finalizing their bidding related to the site work, and the geothermal well fields. And just today, they started issuing bidding documents to the contractors for the rest of the building. So that is actually, it's moving forward as we speak. So those prices will be in shortly, but I guess from your perspective, you have a guaranteed maximum price right now. The theory is you can only save from here. Okay? The first phase of the building, this portion in the dark brown, is scheduled to be completed July 2015. That is keeping your existing building in place, except for the portion that was demolished there to make room for the building to move forward, and your early site prep that was completed before school started. The phase 2, the second phase of this, is also being bid at the same time. It's all under one contract, but its phase in terms of implementation relates to the demolition of the existing building, allowing the art additions and the new lobby to the existing auditorium to be completed. So that will happen after July 2015 and be completed by December 2015. So your students will move in from the existing building to the new building over the summer, well, in August of 2015. They will then be using art, and the plan is to use that in the Falcon's Nest, make some temporary space in there, and then after the change in semester at Christmas break, then they will move into the remainder of the building and you'll be done. Except there may be some seating and stuff that will happen the spring following, but your building will be, for all usable purposes for education, completed December 2015.
And when we use that for temporary space, that will be a much more convenient configuration than what it is currently. The distance between the Falcon's Nest and the building, if I remember right, is about 20 yards, give or take.
Yeah, 60 feet, yeah.
60, yeah. So it's really very convenient for folks to get back and forth, at least in that temporary time, and we won't have to move people off-site. Plus, because of the way the program works with the Ohio School Facilities Commission, any improvements that we need to make in order to use it for swing space are allowed to stay once the project is completed. So if that would happen to, if we would happen to be able to do a few things to update that rec center and they happen to stay afterwards, good for us. So we're taking a look at that as well.
Budget was built in for some modular classrooms to facilitate this, and it's that logic that allows you to do some required improvements there in place of the modulars. Nice move. All right. The third component of this is your site improvements. I mean, the paving, the driveways, all of that stuff is included in the base bid that is going out now. That work will be under contract. The detail of the tennis courts, your varsity soccer field, press box, grandstands, lighting, softball fields to the bottom, the final scoping on that is scheduled to be completed spring of 2014, and bidding on those components to follow. Okay. And Bill, if you want to share anything on the strategy there, it's the idea is to wait on that and see where final prices come in on the project, see if there are any savings, so that can be used to make final decisions on the level of improvement that happens.
Temporary parking is very similar to where those tennis courts are.
Oddly enough. Co-funded that gravel base. Any questions on anything at the high school?
As Todd said, we're out for bid right now, and we'll know much more over the next 5 to 6 weeks as those prices come in for the first set and then the second set, and what that means. There are some alternates that we put out. I believe there are 10 sets of alternates, if I remember the way the document was created, so that we can buy up additional upgrades if the bids come in better than anticipated. And if not, then we still have the quality product that we put forward and the staff commented on. So there's a few things in there, such as terrazzo. We would love to do significant amounts of terrazzo on the first floor, but that's an alternate. It'll depend on how bids come in. But we broke that package up into 3 parts, so we could do a small portion, we could do some common areas, or essentially most of the common first floor, depending on what happens with prices. There's some examples like that we've been into the project. So we'll have those pieces, and as we come back probably for another conversation about this in February, we'll have a much better sense. But I think the other piece that you should hear from both of these gentlemen is we'll essentially have all but 4 buildings bid with firm prices, contingencies built in, and everything else in place relatively close by February. And that would be a great time for us to have a conversation then to start the additional planning or to make sure to do a check to make sure that we're on. There's some contingency issues, some things that when you do construction, you're never sure what you'll find under the ground. And so some of those things can drive the cost. Some of the geothermal wells and other things can have cost implications. So you have to be somewhat conservative in this conversation. But the long and short of what I'm trying to communicate is right now everything is anticipated or on budget based on what we anticipated. Things can only get better from here. From our perspective, we don't anticipate any hiccups. But we'll be able to report back and see what opportunities are ahead of us or exist, and that probably should be February would be a safe date for you to have an understanding of what that looks like.
Other questions or comments? Thank you both for your thoroughness and everything.